today put in this, basically ordered, the conservatives are the ones that did it because the liberals were like, no. They basically said, yes, you can continue to enforce your dumb law that where you gave yourselves the unconstitutional power to enforce immigration and border laws and try and deport people. You can do that. We're gonna while the case goes through court. Mind-numbingly stupid. Why would you let them continue to enforce a law that's a novel concept? The novel concept being that they can enforce border policy. The Constitution clearly gives the authority to enforce immigration and border policy to the federal government. Congress has that power. And the 10th Amendment says the power is delegated to the United States by the Constitution nor prohibited to the states, are reserved to the people, to the states or the people. So here we go. Again, the powers that are delegated to the, not delegated to the United States by the Constitution nor prohibited to it by the people, by the states, are reserved to the states or the people. So the powers that states gets are the ones not given to the federal government and not restricted from the states by the Constitution. So if you have a power that's granted to the federal government, it's not a power that the states get. It's a very simple concept. This should be cut and dry, black and white. Feds have the power to enforce border policies, states don't. It's as simple as that. Yet Texas decides, oh, we're going to go and make ourselves a law. That's unconstitutional. You're usurping the federal government's power. You have no authority to do so. The Constitution is clear. But the Supreme Court decided that, even though the idea that the states could enforce border policy would be a novel concept, it would be the Supreme Court legislating from the bench, but the Supreme Court basically said, hey, we're going to just let the state go on and continue enforcing this law, regardless of the fact that they shouldn't have this power, regardless of the fact that this is something that we're continuing to discuss and it's making its way through the court. It's absolutely bizarre. However, come to find out that the appeals court said, nope. It's back on hold. Like that Wayne's World scene. Like they kept on going, game off, game on. They kept on playing, street hockey or whatever. Every time a car would go, game off, game on. So, from Vox, this is what the Supreme Court's confusing new border decision was explained. This is from earlier today, or updated earlier today. Supreme Court handed out a brief order. We'll look at the brief order, or we'll read the brief order, I guess, in a second. The applications to vacate stay presented to Justice Alito and him by the court are all denied. The orders heretofore entered by Justice Alito are vacated. Justice Barrett, with whom Justice Kavanaugh joins, concurring in denial of the applications to vacate stay. If the Fifth Circuit had issued a stay pending appeal, this court would have applied the four-factor test, blah, blah, but the Fifth Circuit had not entered a stay pending appeal. It said it is an exercise of its docket management authority. It issued a temporary administrative stay and deferred the stay motion to the merits panel, blah, blah, blah. Thus, the Fifth Circuit has not yet rendered a decision on whether a stay pending appeal is warranted. This puts the case in a very unusual procedural state. Administrative stays do not typically reflect the court's consideration of the merits. Rather, they freeze legal proceedings until the court can rule on a party's request for expedited relief, yada, yada, yada. That such stays are administrative does not mean that they are value neutral. Their point is to minimize harm while an appellate court deliberates, so that the choice to issue an administrative stay reflects the first blush judgment of the relative consequences. So basically all this legalese of basically they do an administrative stay to make sure that the court can, while it's deciding to do what it's doing, but guess what? The point is that they're going through the motions of this court. and they're trying to make sure that they're getting this ruling right. So guess what? By allowing them to continue to go through with this law, by allowing them to continue to enforce this law and not having a stay on the law, they're completely going against what they just said. That's how I read it, at least. Let's see, the Supreme Court's order was temporary. The result is quite surprising. Texas law, which allows state officials to arrest migrants and state courts to order them to be deported to Mexico, violates 150 years of settled law, establishing that the federal government and not the states get to decide which foreign nationals may enter or remain in the United States. So not only is it just a constitution, it's settled law, according to this article. Chai Lung versus Freeman, 1875. So basically, in 1875, the court ruled that states do not have the authority. So good, now I have a case to cite when I'm actually arguing my point that, you know, this is not just a matter of the Constitution, that the Supreme Court has already ruled about this. So when it comes down that this activist conservative Supreme Court is going to allow Texas to do what they want to do because they're an activist conservative Supreme Court and they suck, it's going to come down that it'll probably be 5-4 because Roberts will back the stare decisis and of this old case, and the other 5 will be like, okay, well, we think Texas should be able to do it anyway because they're dumb, and it'll probably be a ruling by Alito that doesn't take into consideration, you know, words. See, the full court didn't explain itself, but Coney Barrett wrote a brief explanation, joined by Kavanaugh, why she voted to allow the Texas law to take effect. Her opinion says that she will tolerate a dubious order handed down by a right-wing appeals court, which reinstated the Texas law after a federal judge blocked it, but Barrett's opinion also contains some language indicating that her tolerance won't last forever. Notably, the appeals court reacted to Barrett's opinion in mere hours, scheduling an oral argument for the next morning on whether the Texas law should remain in effect, then issued a second order later that night, effectively suspends the Texas law for the time being. All 3 of the court's Democratic appointees dissented they would have blocked the Texas law from taking effect at all. Texas law is unconstitutional under extraordinarily well-centered law. There's no plausible defense of Texas's deportation law under existing Supreme Court precedents. This court had held consistently over at least a century and a half that the authority to control immigration, to admit or exclude aliens, is vested solely in the federal government. Something that I've been saying on this podcast forever, especially since since DeSantis and Abbott started, shipping undocumented migrants and asylum seekers all over the country, and especially since Texas tried to start, enforcing their own immigration laws. But hey, conservatives want to be like, it's not true. Well, conservatives like to wipe their butts with the Constitution because they don't actually respect it. They don't respect the Constitution at all. Greg Abbott on X, Twitter, whatever, on the X Twitter, the website formerly known as Twitter. While the fight continues to uphold SB 4, Texas continues to arrest illegal immigrants for criminal trespass. More than 41,000 criminal arrests has been made. We continue to build border wall to use NG to erect razor wire to repel migrants and to keep buoy barriers in the river. So Greg Abbott's basically saying that he's continuing to violate the Constitution, that he, so you are continuing to violate the Constitution. I have to type this while I'm on the page, or else I'll forget. Constitution and usurping power that states don't have. Gotcha. Absolutely ridiculous. Like, conservatives can never say at this point on that they have any respect for the Constitution. They can never bring up the Constitution ever again, because this is absurd. If you support this bullshit, because that's what this is. I try not to curse too much on my podcast, but this is bullshit. Completely. There is no reason why these laws should be a thing. And the only reason why these states are attempting to pass these sort of laws is simply because of the fact that they believe that this activist conservative Supreme Court will take an action that benefits them because it's an activist conservative Supreme Court. They believe they have the 5 votes necessary that will allow them to do whatever they want. Who the hell cares about words and their meanings? According to CBS, which is basically the only thing that I can find on this that doesn't have a paywall, it's just a simple appeals court again blocks Texas immigration law just hours after Supreme Court allowed it. Just hours after Supreme Court gave temporary permission for SB4 to go into effect, a controversial Texas law that will allow state to arrest migrants. A federal appeals court Tuesday night issued a ruling that again put this law on hold. Judges on the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals heard the case Wednesday morning. Omar Villafranca has the latest on the legal roller coaster, and it's a video, so I don't necessarily want to play something from CBS News. So let's search for Fifth Circuit instead. So according to the Texas Tribune, disagreement and confusion on display in hearing over Texas's new immigration law. The Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals heard arguments about whether to allow back into effect a law allowing state and local authorities to deport migrants. And if the law is blocked, how does Texas have the authority to arrest these people? It's absolutely bizarre. They should be absolutely prevented from taking any action against these people. But they're still doing it because they're lawless. These Republican politicians, these Republican elected officials are lawless individuals. They don't care about the law. All they care about is making a political point and making points to make Orange Cheeto, Orange Folius happy. Let's see, after a day of whiplash federal court rulings that eventually led to a blocking of a Texas new boundary testing immigration enforcement law, U.S. Fifth Circuit heard arguments Wednesday on whether SB4 should go back to effect while the broader legal case plays out. SB4 seeks to make illegally crossing the border a Class B state misdemeanor, carrying a punishment of up to 6 months in jail. Repeat offenders could face a second-degree felony with a punishment of up to 2 to 20 years in prison. It is designed to give state and local authorities new power to enforce the state's border with Mexico, a job that has previously been left to the federal government. That's Texas Tribune takes some real language there. It's not a job that has been previously left to the federal government. It's a job that has been assigned to the federal government by the Constitution. It's not left to the federal government. It's assigned to the federal government and therefore forbidden from the states. Law also requires state judges to order migrants returned to Mexico if they are convicted, essentially giving them deportation power. They can't have that. A power they can't have because state judges cannot have deportation power because that's a power that's given to the federal government by the Constitution and as such not a power that's retained by the states. 10th Amendment. Read it, MFers. Local law enforcement would be responsible for transporting migrants to the border. A judge could drop the charges if a migrant agrees to return to Mexico voluntarily. SB4 is a modest but important statute. It's not modest, it's bull. It's utter and complete bull. It's a usurping of authority that you don't have. Texas Solicitor General Aaron Nielsen told the judges during the hearing, it's modest because it mirrors federal law. It doesn't mirror federal law because federal law is a legal thing that is granted to the federal government constitutionally because the Constitution says that the federal government, i.e. Congress, can write laws pertaining to immigration and naturalization. It does not state that the states can have that power. It does not, and in fact, it states that states don't get that power via the 10th Amendment because it's a power that's given to the federal government via the Constitution, and as such, via the 10th Amendment, it is not a 10th Amendment power that the states have. 10th Amendment. Read it, MFers who don't understand this very simple point. But that argument has faced skepticism inside and outside the courtroom. The law was initially put on hold by a federal district judge after the federal government and civil rights groups sued to block its implementation. But on Tuesday, Supreme Court let it go into effect for about 8 hours. That came after the Fifth Circuit had issued a stay on a lower court's judge ruling, but the two justices in the high court sent the case back to the appeals court, saying that they made a procedural error. Hours after Amy Coney Barrett issued her opinion, which was joined by Kavanaugh, the Fifth Circuit scheduled a hearing over Zoom for Wednesday. Late Tuesday night, the appeals court issued a 2-1 ruling that effectively blocked SB4 again. The judges on the appeals panel during Wednesday's morning were Priscilla Richmond, a nominee from George W. Bush, Ramirez, a Biden nominee, and Andrew Oldham, a Trump nominee who dissented in Tuesday's night ruling. Of course he dissented in Tuesday's night's ruling. Oldham, who was previously general counsel for Governor Greg Abbott, I wonder why he dissented. He was general counsel for Greg Abbott, and now he's hearing a case that is supported by Greg Abbott. Why didn't he recuse himself? Why wasn't another part of the panel brought forward? He sounded more sympathetic towards Texas lawyers' arguments. Of course he did, because he's a freaking Texan and backing Abbott, saying that in order for the federal government to win, they need to prove every provision of the law is unlawful. I could do that in one click of a mouse button. There you go. The law is unlawful. I just did it with a click of a mouse button. 10th Amendment, bitches. We have no clue on if this would have actually been enforced, because there's not been a single person who's been arrested, not a single person who's been ordered removed, not a single state judge who's had the occasion to adjudicate a single provision of this in any way. So we're predicting all of this. It doesn't matter, because they don't have the authority to do any of it. Because guess what? 10th Amendment, bitches. But Richmond, the Bush nominee, appeared skeptical. At times, the uncertainty surrounding the law was on display in the courtroom. Who would have thought that you would be like, that George H.W. or George W. Bush would actually have nominated somebody reasonable? At times, the uncertainty surrounding the law was on display in the courtroom Wednesday. Many questions remain unanswered about how and when the law would be enforced. A judge on the panel asked Nielsen how the law would be applied for an immigrant who crossed the border into Arizona or Canada and then later moved to Texas. I confess, Your Honor, I don't know, Nielsen admitted. Nielsen also requested that the appeals court at least let some provisions of the law stand if it prevents others from going into effect. He said Texas police should be able to arrest people suspected of crossing the border illegally and turn them over to federal authorities. Richmond noted that nowhere in SB4 does it say police should turn over migrants to federal administration agents or immigration agents, which is true. It doesn't say that, because it's not in there, and they don't have the authority to do so. Why don't they have the authority to do so? 10th Amendment, bitches. Lawyers for the U.S. Department of Justice and Immigration Rights Organizations also presented arguments saying SB4 preempts federal law. They said SB4 goes further than what Arizona's SB 1070, a state immigration law that passed in 2010. The U.S. Supreme Court gutted a provision of the law that allowed police to arrest people if they suspected they were there without legal immigration status. In that case, like the previous federal court rulings, the High Court said the federal government has sole jurisdiction over immigration matters. Why does the federal government has sole jurisdiction over immigration matters? Because Article 1, Section 8 gave the power to do that to the federal government, and then 10th Amendment, bitches. Another hearing is scheduled for April 2nd in the appeals court. It is unclear whether the three-judge panel will issue a ruling. Tuesday night's decision caused some observers to suspect that Texas faces long odds on getting the Fifth Circuit to immediately allow the law to go back into effect. Rafi Melakonian, an appellate lawyer in Houston who tuned into the court hearing, said he doesn't believe Texas lawyers were able to convince the majority on the panel. It's fair to say that the panel seemed unconvinced of a stay at the very least. He added that Nielsen is a small person, but that he may have struggled to answer some of the questions from the panel because the law doesn't work correctly. That's the problem with Texas, because they can't articulate what they want to do that's different from enforcing immigration law, which they're not allowed to do. And why are they not allowed to do it? Everybody at the same time? 10th Amendment, bitches. In December, an ACLU and Texas Civil Rights Project sued Texas on behalf of El Paso County and two immigrant rights organizations over the new state law. The following month, its Department of Justice filed its lawsuit against Texas. The lawsuits have since been combined. Last week, Mexican American Legal Defense and Educational Fund and the National Immigration Law Center also filed a lawsuit on behalf of La Unión del Pueblo Entero, an advocacy group in the Rio Grande Valley founded by farmers' rights advocates Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta. So there you go. If I turn this into, if I upload this entire thing, this entire recording as a separate video, I should just call it 10th Amendment bitches. Right? Anyway, so since I recorded this, what do you think of the video? Agree or disagree, leave your comments below. Remember to like and subscribe, and have a good day. 10th Amendment bitches.